does the brain end and consciousness begin? Or are they the same thing? Where does the soul reside? These are questions that have baffled philosophers and curious people for eternity, especially since there was no scientific way to come up with answers. But then people started paying attention to a phenomenon that seemingly had no explanation: near-death experiences. In recent years, more and more people have come forward to talk about what happened when they, quote unquote, died and came back to life. For many, it's a life-altering event. Even so, NDEs remain a mystery and a source of fascination for anyone interested in the concept of life after death. My guest today, Transformational Coach Lion Goodman, had a near-death experience that had a profound effect on his life. Lion is now the CEO of the Clear Beliefs Institute, which is dedicated to awakening, healing, and enlightening humanity in order to get on with the job of being fully human. And he's the creator of the Clear Beliefs method of trauma-informed therapeutic coaching. Lion is also the author of 5 books, and he teaches workshops around the world. Welcome to the Dream Power Experience, Lion.
Thank you so much, Debbie. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Oh, it is my pleasure, Lion. But Lion, tell me, who was Lion Goodman before your NDE?
What an interesting question. It's sort of like Alice in Wonderland. I've changed so many times today, it's hard to remember who I am, and that's true in my lifetime. I was kind of a lonely kid who grew up into a curious young man who wanted to understand, who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? And what the hell is going on? So I was very fortunate in college to meet a great teacher, a man named T.D. Lingo, and he taught a natural consciousness expansion focused on the brain. So he had 250 acres of beautiful mountain property west of Denver, and we sat outside and studied the brain and talked about consciousness and played with our consciousness. And that really set me off on a lifetime quest for understanding those questions, the big questions of life, especially what is consciousness. So I graduated from college with a degree in consciousness studies. It was probably one of the first degrees granted in that field. It was in 1975. And today there's many master's and PhD programs in that topic. I got my bachelor's way back then in that field. But nobody was hiring people with degrees in consciousness studies because I invented it, as far as I knew. And so I needed a job, and I took one. I just took the best job I could, which was selling material objects on the road. So I became a traveling salesman. And I did that for about a year and a half, 2 years. And I was really bored. I was traveling around having a good time. I was kind of a hippie salesman. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought maybe I'd go back to school and get a PhD in psychology or get an MD, which was the original idea. But I was just kind of a lost hippie salesman. So that's who I was at that time.
Yes, but you already were interested in consciousness before you had your NDE. So tell me, what happened to cause the near-death experience?
I was being a really nice guy. That's what caused it. While I was on the road, I would stop and help people. I just had this kind of ethic of be nice to people and help when you can. And so if somebody's tire had blown out, I'd help them change the tire, or I'd give them a ride to the gas station if they needed gas. It was just my ethic of being on the road. And on this particular day, I had been in Las Vegas selling my jewelry and gift items to stores, and I was heading into LA. And in between LA and Las Vegas is the Mojave Desert. And so I was driving through the Mojave Desert, and I saw a guy whose car had broken down and his hood was up and he was staring into it. And so I stopped and I said, can I help you in any way? And he said, I just put $200 into her and now she won't start and I don't know what to do. And I said, well, I'm heading into LA. Do you want to ride? And he looked at me kind of funny and went, yeah, okay. And he he got in the van and he brought all his stuff, duffel bags and suitcases and stuff. And it was already a crowded van. It was an RV that was made from a van. And so he ended up traveling with me for 3 days. He didn't have anything to do. I kind of took him under my wing. I was giving him clothes to wear and talking about things with him. And the third night out, he pulled out a gun and shot me 4 times in the head.
God. Oh. So what happened?
Good question. What happened? So when the first bullet hit me and the explosion, I was way in the back of the van in this crouched position, moving things around in the cupboards. He was in front of in the front seat, listening to music. That's all I knew. Everything was peaceful, and suddenly there was an explosion. Something hit me in the head, and I thought maybe the gas stove had exploded, which was just up to my left. I looked up, and that was intact. And I looked further to my left, and there he was with a gun pointed at me from the front seat. And I
Oh,
realized he had shot me. And I was, of course, in shock. And I think I said, "Are you shooting at me?" It's like it was just so unbelievable out of nowhere. And he said, "Shut up, just shut up." And then he shot again. And at first I thought he was warning me, like he wanted to steal my stuff. Fine, leave me outside naked and take everything. It's like, at that moment, it's like, nothing matters except your life. But when he shot the second time, I realized, oh, he's not warning me. He's going to kill me. I was 26 years old. I had this background in consciousness and spirituality and science, the sciences and all that. But now I'm just a sitting duck, ready to die. And I had studied death and dying, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, in college. So I knew what to expect. It wasn't a big surprise. It was surprising that I was going to die at the age of 26. And at one point I had the thought, oh, this is why I didn't know what my future was, because I don't have one.
mm.
But at that point, so the second bullet missed me by a fraction of an inch. And I realized, okay, if I'm going to die, I don't want to die angry. I don't want to die upset. I want to die in peace. So I sort of made myself peaceful and started reaching up to God and saying, okay, I'm coming home. And I also realized I didn't want to die with any unfinished business. And so I did a fast reverse movie reel of my life. And I asked forgiveness from anyone I had hurt. And I forgave everyone that had hurt me.
And you
That was
actually
just
have
the way.
time to do that when he's got a gun pointed you, and there was enough time to think about.
Well, I was out of time. I mean, I was out of time. There was no time. I was in this very expanded state, reaching up to God and doing these processes. And I didn't know how much time I had left, whether it was seconds or minutes. And I don't know how long this process took, actually, because I was completely out of that zone. Um, and so he shot a third time, and the third bullet also missed me by a fraction of an inch. But I couldn't move. I couldn't defend myself. This was inevitable. And so after I cleared the past, I started rising up and welcoming the God light coming in. And at one point, I was out of my body, looking down at this van with these two people doing this little drama, and found that kind of amusing. It was like, oh, look at the little human drama going down there, going on down there. Isn't that fascinating? Um, and then the fourth bullet rang out, and my head was suddenly pushed to the side, and blood was rushing down. And I was back in my body, which I thought was strange because I was supposed to be out of my body. I knew that much. It's like I was already partly out. Just waiting for the rest to catch up. And but I'm back in my body, and I had also studied anatomy, physiology, dance, mime. So I was very familiar with my body and also my mind. So I was just checking. I was kind of doing this scan of like, if the bullet went through my brain, I ought to be missing something. But I wasn't missing anything that I could tell. And so, after a few seconds of kind of doing an internal check, I said, well, I don't want to die without looking my assassin in the eyes. And so I lifted up my head and I turned and looked at him, and he freaked out. And he jumped up and he said, "Why aren't you dead, man? You're supposed to be dead." And I didn't have a good answer for that question. So I just said, here I am. And I'm still filled with this God light, and golden honey color light just radiating out of me. And he said, that's too weird, man. It's too weird. It's just like my dream this morning. Since you're a dream expert. And I said, what dream? And he said, I dreamt that I was shooting at this guy, but he wouldn't die. But it wasn't you, it was somebody else in the dream. And at this point I said, okay, this is weird. This is very weird. How did I get into this movie? I don't remember signing a contract. And am I going to get paid at the end? It's like, that was like, just like, this is just so strange. And and he was jumping around with a gun in his hand, looking out the windows. We were out in the middle of nowhere, camped out, so there was nobody nearby. And he said, why aren't you dead, man? Why aren't you dead? I shot you 4 times, man. And I said, maybe I'm not supposed to die. He said, yeah, but I shot you 4 times. And so he's all adrenalated. And at one point he kind of came up and looked at my head with a gun in his hand. He's standing right here. And he said, does it hurt? And at that moment, I knew that something had shifted in him. He was now caring about me. He went from wanting to kill me to caring. And I said, yeah, it hurts, but I think I'm okay. It was like being hit on the head with a bat a couple of times. And there was lots of blood. So I didn't know where the bullet had gone. And I was still trying to figure it out. It's like, if I touched it, it was like all matted with blood, and blood was dripping down everywhere. So there were some more exchanges, and then he said, okay, man, I'm going to take you to a hospital, I know, but I'm going to put some stuff around you so you can't get up, okay? And I went, yeah, that's fine. I thought that was a really good idea. Let's go to the hospital. Yeah, let's go to the hospital. Wonderful. So he took some boxes and things, and he sort of put it around me, and then he got in the front of the van, turned on the engine, and started driving. And at that point, I had some time, maybe half an hour, to just contemplate what had just happened to me. It was so out of nowhere that I couldn't figure it out. I just couldn't fathom what had just happened, except I'd been shot 4 times, 2 bullets hit me, and I was out of body. Now I'm back in body. I'm back. And so if he drove for a while, and then finally he pulled the van over and stopped it and turned off the engine. And it was very quiet. And I knew we weren't near a hospital because there were no bright lights. It was dark. And so I just waited. And after a minute or two, he came over and sat next to me on the bed right next where I was squatted down. And with a gun in his hand, he said, I can't take you to the hospital, man. I have to kill you. And I said, oh, why is that? I find that it's good to be curious in these kinds of situations. And he said, because if I take him back to the hospital, they'll put me back in jail. I can't go back to jail, man. And I realized, oh, and not only is it a crazy person with a gun, it's an ex-con with a gun. It's like kind of elevated the seriousness of the situation. And so that began an 8-hour conversation. We talked for 8 hours. And during that time, the sky lightened up. I heard birds singing. It was the most beautiful sound I've ever heard in my life.
And
I realized,
shot, you weren't in such pain that you could actually have a conversation.
yeah. And I got him to talk about his background. At one point, I've been in this crouched position for hours. And at one point I said, I'd like to get out and stretch because I'm really cramped. And he said, okay, but don't do anything funny. I went, oh, I won't do anything funny. Promise. And so I got out and stretched, and then he pointed down this slope to a pond that was there, and kind of motioned I should go down there. And so I walked down, and I realized he could shoot me in the back and push me into the water. But I also felt invincible. I was filled with this godlight and love and appreciation, and he was included in it. There was no separation between us. So I bent down, washed off some of the blood, and stood up and looked at him, and he kind of held the gun out like this. And he said, what would you do if I handed you this gun? I said, I'd throw it into the water there. And he said, you wouldn't shoot me? You wouldn't try to kill me? I said, no, why would I do that? You've got your life. I've got mine. We're okay. And then he looked at me really strangely and he said, man, you are the weirdest person I've ever met. I thought, yeah, I'm probably the weirdest person you'll ever meet.
He picked the wrong person to point a gun.
Well, interestingly, he told me that when his car broke down, he was so desperate, he decided to kill whoever stopped to help him. And I volunteered.
Mm.
So at some level, you know, I take responsibility for my decisions and actions, right? So I put myself in that position. And so ultimately, we were trying to figure out how to get out of the situation. He didn't want to go back to jail. I didn't want to die.
So, Lion, you are there with your uh, person who shot at you, wanting to kill you, but you were still alive. What happened?
As I was saying, we began a very long conversation of 8 hours, and we were trying to figure out how to not kill each other or put each other in jail. So I came up with lots of ideas, and he kept saying, no, that won't work. If I let you go, they'll come after me. I even said, you can take the van. And he said, no, it's that, they'll come after me, they'll find me, and I'll go back to jail. I can't go back to jail. He was very certain about that. And eventually I said, look, I'll let you go and I won't turn you in, and you let me go, and that'll be the deal. And he thought about it for a minute and he said, okay. And we shook on it. And then and so that was how we agreed to let each other go, basically. And he drove to a place that he knew, took his bags and suitcases and duffel bags out of the van, and I walked him to the bus stop and shook his hand, and he just kept looking at me like, you are so weird. and I went back and I drove myself to the hospital where the doctor, the ER doctor, said, you 2 bullets bounced off your skull. And he was sewing up my scalp, and he said, you're a lucky man. And I said, no, I'm a blessed man. So that led me to change my life. First of all, it made me even more interested in consciousness. So I started taking workshops and trainings. I took over 100 workshops and trainings in the intervening years. And I also wanted to get a job away from being on the road. So I became a headhunter, which is kind of ironic given that I just had my head hunted. But
Yeah.
that was the profession that I went into. And I had a wonderful 25-year career there before becoming a coach and a trainer.
As you were telling the story, something popped into my head. I'd like to ask you about it. Do you think that your ability to unconditionally forgive him saved your life?
Yes. And there was another factor also that I figured out later, which is that I was so relaxed in that golden godlight that when the fourth bullet hit me, it actually pushed my head over, allowing the bullet to glance off. Had I had any tension, anger, upset, fear, and a stiff neck, it probably would have blown the top of my head off. So part of it was love and including him in that love light. So it was transforming him. And part of it was just the sheer physics of being relaxed and accepting what was happening. Because the one thing I learned before that, which I now teach, is that when we resist our experiences, or we resist, or we don't feel our feelings, they get stuck in us in some way, and that we can reverse that by actually experiencing what we haven't experienced. So, for example, in trauma, any trauma, we can go back and experience it fully, and then it can resolve. It's just like food that's undigested in the gut. It needs to be digested and worked out. So all experiences from the past that we've resisted, and we've resisted a lot of experiences, are stuck somewhere in the body, mind, spirit arena.
Right. It's like when you can expose whatever isn't working for you out to the light of day, it clears it. Or
Exactly.
helps, at
Exactly.
least helps
Yeah.
clear something else. I want to go back to the NDE itself for a minute. Uh, you said you were bathed in this golden light. Is that kind of like, we hear stories of people say they see the white light? Was that sort of the same kind of thing, or is it a little bit different for you?
It's different. I think primarily because I knew I was going to die, and I knew how I wanted to die, and so I was reaching up to God. But clearly, it wasn't my time to die, and I didn't actually die. So I didn't actually come. My heart didn't stop. My brain didn't stop. I was fully conscious and aware of everything that was happening, and so I was in a conscious near death state, but it wasn't near death where I was going to be dead. I could have been dead, but it was different than the classic NDE where somebody dies on the operating table and comes back.
Right. So at the time, did you tell anybody about it, or did you keep it a secret back then?
Well, the first thing I did when I got to LA and got myself patched up is I called a girlfriend of mine who came and sort of hung out with me for a couple of weeks while I was putting my mind back together. And then I got my first job, and I started writing down the experience. And I eventually had a 26-page detailed uh, tome about the experience, and I tried to get it published. And people were going, "No, it's too long. It's we don't know what to do with this." so, uh, at one point, I heard the NPR's National Story Project. And they said, if you have a true story and you can put it in 2 pages or less, we're interested in hearing your story. And I went, well, if I could take my 26 pages of experience and cram it down into 2 pages, that would be something. And so I did that. Of course, it was very tiny print and all the way out to the edges, but I sent it in, and I got a call back from the associate producer, and she said, Paul Auster was the editor, and she said, Paul wants to publish your story, but he needs to know what happened next, because I had to leave it at a certain point. And I said, well, I could do that, but it's going to take more than 2 pages, and I've got this 26-page version. So anyway, I sent both to her, and Paul actually edited it together, and it appeared in the book called I thought my father was God and Other True Tales from NPR's National Story Project, which was a bestseller internationally. So that was the first place it got published. It's been published many times since in other magazines and blog sites. And a film was made based on my story that won Best Film at a film festival.
Oh, fantastic. Uh, were you a religious person before your NDE, and did it change your thoughts about God?
I was a spiritual person. I was one of those early spiritual hippies. I grew up in Boulder, and so everything was happening spiritually was happening in Boulder, whether it was Buddhism or Sufism and everything else you can imagine. So I was steeped in all the religions and all the spiritual practices, and I was just right in the middle of all that. So I was already spiritual. I was raised Jewish, but I had left that behind many years before, and so it seemed like a smooth flow of being, going from religion to spirituality to near death to being more spiritual. So it feels like an arc that made sense to me.
Okay. You now teach people how to clear disempowering self-limiting beliefs. We don't have a lot of time left to devote a lot of time to this, but could you talk a little bit about this and how you do it and what?
Sure, sure. The Clear Beliefs method is composed of many different technologies that I brought together from my 100+ workshops, trainings, and extensive therapy and shamanic studies. And it's based on the fact that beliefs are actually the infrastructure of the human mind, in the same way that neurons are the infrastructure of the human brain. And so when we look at beliefs, they're made of experiences. We have experiences we take on certain conclusions, or people tell us things that are their beliefs because they want us to believe them. And we build who we are. We build a personality. We build a self out of these beliefs. And so in my methodology, we go to that core subconscious system, the patterns of belief and structure, and we work there at the subconscious mind, as well as the conscious mind and the superconscious mind, the higher self. It's a multidimensional approach because we are multidimensional beings having multidimensional experiences. Right now, you're seeing, feeling, hearing, smelling, thinking, and and so our beliefs must also be multidimensional. And most technologies that try to change beliefs are trying to change them mentally, at the mental verbal level. Well, just believe something different. Just say a different thing to yourself over and over again. But that doesn't cover all the rest of the places where beliefs lay, because they are the infrastructure. So this is that's my approach, and it works incredibly well. We're able to clear things, old patterns, traumas, wounds from the past very quickly, permanently, and completely.
That is amazing. And we will have a link to some of your information in the show notes for people to find out about it. But
Right.
like, how can people find out more about you and your work?
There's many things, many places to do so. I say that I have multiple website disorder. And so uh, the best place to go is liongoodman.com, Lion, goodman.com. That's my personal website. If people are interested in my training, if they're a coach, therapist, healer, or consultant, that website is clearbeliefs.com. And if they're interested in getting their own beliefs cleared, they can go to clearyourbeliefs.com.
Hey, we've been speaking about near-death experiences with Lion Goodman. Hope you've enjoyed today's program. If so, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.